Jack the Ripper remains one of the most infamous and disturbing figures in criminal history, a shadowy killer whose crimes terrorized London's East End in the autumn of 1888 and whose identity has never been conclusively discovered. The murders occurred in the Whitechapel district, one of the poorest and most overcrowded areas of Victorian London. Whitechapel was a place of extreme poverty, disease, alcoholism, and crime, where thousands lived in slums and many women turned to prostitution simply to survive. This environment created the perfect conditions for a predator to operate unseen, and Jack the Ripper exploited it with chilling precision. Between late August and early November 1888, a series of brutal murders shocked the city. While there were many violent crimes in Whitechapel at the time, 5 murders are generally accepted as the canonical Ripper killings. The victims, Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly, were all women living on the margins of society, most believed to have engaged in prostitution. Their bodies were discovered late at night or in the early hours of the morning, often in dark alleyways, courtyards, or small rooms, with their throats cut and their bodies horrifically mutilated. What set these murders apart was the extreme level of violence and apparent anatomical knowledge displayed by the killer. After slashing the victims' throats, the murderer mutilated their bodies, removing organs such as the uterus and, in one case, the kidney. These acts led some investigators to believe the killer had medical or surgical experience, though others argued the injuries could have been inflicted by someone with basic knowledge and extreme savagery. The brutality suggested not just a desire to kill, but a disturbing fascination with the human body and domination over his victims. Public fear escalated rapidly as newspapers sensationalized the crimes. London was gripped by panic, and the press played a major role in turning the unknown killer into a legend. The name Jack the Ripper emerged after a series of letters were sent to newspapers and the police, written by someone claiming to be the murderer. While many of these letters were likely hoaxes, they fueled hysteria and cemented the killer's ominous nickname in history. One letter, which allegedly included part of a human kidney, horrified the public and intensified the belief that the murderer was taunting authorities. The Metropolitan Police launched one of the largest manhunts Britain had ever seen. Detectives conducted house-to-house searches, interviewed thousands of residents, followed countless leads, and compiled extensive suspect lists. Despite these efforts, policing methods at the time were limited. There was no forensic science as we know it today, no DNA analysis, no modern crime scene preservation. Evidence was often contaminated or lost. Witnesses gave contradictory accounts, and the chaos of the crowded streets made tracking the killer nearly impossible. As the murders continued, anger grew toward the police and government officials, who were accused of incompetence and indifference toward the poor. Vigilante patrols formed in Whitechapel, and racial tensions increased, with immigrants, especially Jewish residents, frequently blamed without evidence. The case exposed deep social divisions in Victorian society and highlighted how little protection existed for the poor, particularly women. The final and most horrific murder, that of Mary Jane Kelly in November 1888, appeared to mark the end of the Ripper's reign. Kelly was found murdered in her small rented room, her body mutilated far more extensively than the others. After her death, the killings abruptly stopped. Whether Jack the Ripper died, was imprisoned for another crime, left the area, or simply ceased killing remains unknown. Over the following decades, the case became the subject of endless speculation. Hundreds of suspects have been proposed, ranging from local butchers and doctors to members of the royal family and famous artists. Some theories suggest the murders were the work of a single sadistic killer, while others argue that more than one person may have been responsible. Modern forensic attempts, including DNA analysis of preserved evidence, have produced controversial and inconclusive results, often disputed by experts. More than a century later, Jack the Ripper has transcended the crimes themselves to become a cultural phenomenon. Books, films, documentaries, and conspiracy theories continue to revisit the case, blending fact and fiction. Yet behind the legend lies a grim reality. 5 women brutally murdered and a society unable, or unwilling, to protect its most vulnerable members. Jack the Ripper endures not only because the mystery remains unsolved, but because the case represents fear of the unknown, the darkness hidden within cities, and the unsettling idea that some horrors leave no answers behind. The streets of Whitechapel may have changed, but the shadow of the Ripper still looms over history, a reminder that some crimes refuse to be forgotten.